A lot of people hope this series in Miami was a potential turning point in the Mets season. As we know, the Marlins are not a well-rounded baseball team, but unfortunately for the Mets' sake, they dropped 2 of 3 in South Beach. Welcome to the Queens Connection, episode number 14, a production of Patton Sports Creative. I am your host, Andrew Patton, joined as always by the co-host in the Netherlands, that is Corne Hogeveen. Corne, you predicted a series sweep. I don't like to rub things in, mostly because it's at the Mets' expense. But you dropped the ball of late on these predictions.
Yes, and honestly, I think you'll like to see the Mets losing more when I'm wrong.
No,
So that's it. It is what it is. I know you're just like me being wrong um, over the Mets. So you hoped that actually, I think you actually hoped that the Marlins swept us. I
no,
really do.
no,
I
no, no,
think
no,
you.
never, never. No, no, no. There are some things where I don't want you to be on, at the top, where we have to pump your tires all the time. But this was a scenario where I would be happy to pump your tires if you were correct. Unfortunately, you've been dropping the ball of late, like I said. So the
Yeah,
the, the
it
court,
was the wrong move to be positive
I got, you just
after
got
Thursday win.
exactly. You got to be like everyone else. You got to be super negative, and and no, to be fair, I guess if you want to be negative, there's some reasons to be negative. Maybe not overly negative, like a certain hefty gentleman who makes his rounds on social media, who gets a lot of attention for being super negative. But um, there are some concerning things of late for the New York Mets, and I mean we can dive right into it. This one, I wouldn't say is a big concern per se, but Christian Scott Friday night in the opener of the series with the Marlins did have his first rough major league outing. I think maybe uh, I don't want to say a little unexpected because you knew eventually he was going to kind of hit a wall, a major league wall. It's just unfortunate that it came against the Miami Marlins, a lineup you look up and down and you're not overly impressed with. Scott on the Friday night game that the Mets lost 8-0. He was only able to go 4 innings, 7 hits, 4 runs, all were earned, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. He did allow a home run to Nick Fortes, who was a sneaky Met killer. I mean, you think
Hmm.
about the walk-off home run he hit a couple of years ago in the game that seemed like the Mets were going to win. So even with Nick Fortes having a very below average OPS, shall we say, always finds a way to harm the Mets. Fortes went 3 for 3 in that game with 3 RBIs. But let's turn it back to Christian Scott. Like I said, you knew eventually he was going to have a rough major league outing. It just happened to be his third major league start. I believe he said in his post game, just didn't feel like he had his fastball command. So, what'd you take away from Christian Scott in this Friday night outing against the Marlins?
Oh, everything you mentioned, everything you said is right. You knew that at some point he's gonna have his learning moment, and um, he wasn't sharp. Command of his fastball was off. He hung some breaking balls. I think the Fortes home run was a hanging breaking ball up in the zone, which he clobbered. Um, although I also have to add that he did get out of that bases loaded no out jam in the fourth, which um, it wasn't necessarily good, obviously, but at that point, down by 4 runs against the Marlins, you with that inning getting out of that jam, he gave the Mets an opportunity to come back. So um, that showed a little bit maturity. Obviously, he was off. It happens. Moving on for Christian Scott, and still looking forward to his next start on Friday. Possibly, I heard just a couple of minutes ago. Um, so I'm not overly concerned about Scott at all. One thing what about the whole game, what I thought was funny that you mentioned Fortes, but also Rohan, who I honestly never heard of before the series, had a great game. So the 8 and 9 hitters, I think they did the most damage against us. So that's mostly not the case if you face a team, but this time it wasn't necessarily the top of the order, but it was the bottom two that hurt the Mets a lot in this game, which was just an odd thing.
Yeah, and the Marlins lineup, like I said, kind of introducing this game. Obviously, there are some guys in there we know are good, solid major leaguers. Jazz Chisholm, Brian De La Cruz, very underrated player, I think. He's been very good for the Marlins since they picked him up. We know Josh Bell can be a good player, even though he's not having a great start to the season. But it's that bottom half of the order, like you said, a lot of guys you're probably not familiar with that did the damage against Christian Scott and the Mets. And while the Marlins lineup was able to generate some chances, some runs, unfortunately for the Mets' sake, they weren't able to on their end. Um, just not a whole lot of action going on with that lineup. Brandon Nimmo was out because he was still battling the flu that's going around the clubhouse, I guess. So he wasn't in there. We know he's really been their most productive offensive player this year, I would say. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. So just not really generating a whole lot offensively. We know in that Phillies series. They decided to shake things up, get Mark Vientos up here, so we know Vientos is going to be playing against left-handers. So third base is a little bit of a platoon. Um, but that Friday night game, the Mets offense not getting a whole lot. And to be fair, they're facing a pretty good starter in Jesus Luzardo, who also seems to have the Mets number. We know he can be a very dominant left-handed pitcher, but I think after that Philly series, particularly those two games in Philadelphia, where the offense was able to put some runs on the board in those two games, you would hope that maybe that would carry over to Miami for Friday night, and unfortunately, that just was not the case.
No, you mentioned Mets facing a very good arm in Jesus Luzardo. Is if you look at this year's numbers, he's off to not a great start, but we know Jesus Luzardo is better than that, and he showed that on Friday. So, a guy from the Marlins, you hoped that um, he had another uneven start to his uneven start of the year, but you knew that at some point that Jesus Luzardo is not going to have an ERA over 5.5. So he started to turn things around against the Mets. Unfortunately, I think he will end up still having a pretty solid year for the Marlins. So um, it was that type of game which was not necessarily expected because I expected better from Scott. But after you saw Scott just not having it, um, it was a real possibility that would be a pretty big loss for the Mets because Luzardo was on, Scott wasn't. And after Scott not able to go that deep into the game, you also know that you need some of your lesser arms to get some innings in. And both Hardwick and Josh Walker had a good first inning, but with the 4 innings, the Mets needed to get an inning more out of both of those guys. And for both those guys, the second inning was an issue, and they added on. And then after that, it was just a lost game. And we saw at some point that the Mets maybe had a comeback in them and just fell short. Um, I like comebacks, but they have to work. And so this was necessarily that bad of a loss. It was a bad loss, but it was a loss that was a possibility.
Yeah, no question about that. Jesus Luzardo, if memory serves me correctly, was traded from the A's to the Marlins for Starling Marte, if I am correct. And you're giving me the head shake of approval, so I am correct in that, which is very
Well,
rare
if
every now and
I'm
then.
correct too, uh, I'm not a human Google machine.
Oh, so you're not a degenerate like I am, who knows who can pull this stuff out of his you know what, and you know doesn't really serve a purpose in life per se. You know.
I'm not gonna comment on that.
All right. Well, let's comment on the Saturday game as the Mets were definitely looking to rebound from a shutout Friday night and a little bit of I would say a drastic change to the lineup was something we had bantered about on previous episodes about maybe dropping Brandon Nimmo down to the 3 spot in the lineup, and that's what the Mets did. They're shaking things up. They put Lindor in the leadoff spot, followed by Alonso and Nimmo. So a change in the top three of the batting order. before we really dive into the Saturday's game, what were your thoughts on that shakeup from Carlos Mendoza?
Now, first thing what came to mind is like you mentioned that we talked about it in two podcasts ago. It was part of our conversation. Should we bet Nemo lower in the order, or not necessarily lower in statue, but lower in the lineup, and moving in a more productive role? Um, Funny that they did it, and I mean, at some point after Friday being shut out, the offense overall just as they had their stretches of some good games, but overall I think they're underwhelming. So you have to try something. You have to try to get some runs on the board. Maybe Pete betting second um, works for him. Maybe Lindor leading off works for him. They're both bound to break out, but not necessarily having a them type year so far. So they are struggling. And Nimmo is your best hitter right now. He's your most clutch hitter. So um, to me, it's yeah, it's not necessarily like we said that we wanted Nimmo out of the leadoff spot, but with the offense struggling so much, I think you have to try something.
Yeah, and at this point in the season, I think I told you in our chat, you might as well just throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see if something sticks. I mean, what he had to lose at this point, you gotta try something to shake things up. And it looked like it worked pretty well because in that game, the Mets offense broke out for 9 runs and 15 hits. You think usually that's going to be enough to win you a ball game, and it looked like it was until that ninth inning. The Mets were coming into the ninth up 9-5, and they brought Edwin Diaz in, who we knew has been struggling of late. I'm going to come out and just say I like the spot there for Diaz for using him there. It's a 4-run lead um, against, like we said, a Marlins team who did put up 5 runs going to that ninth inning. Um, but just you look at the lineup, it's not an overly impressive lineup. And once again, it was that bottom half of the door that got things going for the Marlins. They would eventually tie the game. Just maybe a couple unlucky hits there. I think particularly the De La Cruz one before Josh Bell's home run. Just a uh, I guess it's classified as an infield hit, but a tough play for the third baseman. Was it it was Vientos. Vientos was in the game at that point, or well, he started the game, so he was already in the game. But um, obviously that the headliner is Edwin Diaz. From this game that the Mets would eventually lose in extra innings, 10-9. So a real tough, heartbreaking loss for the Mets. Um, and now there's a lot of questions about Edwin Diaz. We've said on this podcast we're not too concerned about Diaz. We think he'll pull, turn things around, get back into form. Not 2022 form necessarily, but back to being a solid major league closer. Uh, but now perhaps the feelings have changed a little bit on that. So let's get your thoughts on where things stand with Edwin Diaz, your confidence level in him getting things turned around, and uh, right now I guess it's going to be a fluid situation with the closer's role. So how long are you? Do you think this fluid closer is going to be?
First of all, confidence in him returning to the closer spot is pretty high for me. I think we'll definitely see Edwin Diaz back in the closer's role. It's just a stretch for Edwin Diaz where everything goes wrong, and we see what confidence can do with with a baseball player because um, yeah, we heard Steve Gelb's his report before the game yesterday, and the guy cares. The guy is just right now not a confident arm, and when you aren't confident, a lot of bad things happen until you get your mojo back. And right now, Diaz has lost that 2022 mojo. Um, I think before this blown save, you could, if it wasn't even a blown save because it wasn't a save opportunity, but before this, Saturday outing, you still saw some glimpses of the real Edwin Diaz. Yes, the walks. Yes, the home run ball. But 4 runs against the Marlins is the first time for me that um, I I would say this is the right move to put him out of the closer's role for now and uh, get him into some games where the pressure isn't that immense and try to figure out his issues. But I was writing an article about the other options to replace Edwin Diaz, and his baseball savant numbers are still really good. Um, his expected ERA was 2.31 or something like that, which obviously you still take. Still doesn't allow a lot of hard hits. The only issues was the barrel rate. So when they make contact, they tend to hit it well, as we have seen with the home run ball. But overall, uh, there were too many good things in the baseball savant page. Still striking out a lot. The average exit velo was still very good. Um, the hard hit rate was solid. If you look at the expected batting average, slugging, it was all still top of the league. So um, that shows to me that it may be a combination of unlucky, a bit like 2019. I know it's not the same as 2019. Let me not say that, but it felt like every bad pitch Edwin Diaz threw, it went for a home run. So it's a little bit, you know, like that. But we also have seen when the guy has his confidence that he is an elite arm. So um, I don't think it's gonna be this way too long. I hope that Edwin Diaz has like 3 or 4 good outings in another role and then gets back. That's my hope.
I want to ask you about the expectations put on Diaz because we know Diaz. We've heard him say it, in his post-game press conferences, talking about trying to get back to that 2022 form. I think there's a section of the fan base that automatically assumed that Edwin Diaz was going to be back to that 2022 form after missing all of 2023. So the pressure that's been put on Diaz, whether it's do you think it's more from putting the pressure on himself, or do you think maybe he's feeling pressure from the fan base to be back to that elite dominant arm? I mean, the best season we've seen from a closer in a while. Do you think Diaz felt the pressure from the fans and he put that pressure on himself, or do you think the pressure was already kind of there without the outside noise?
I think he has a very high expectation of himself. I didn't hear the remarks of him saying he wanted to go back to the 2022 version of Edwin Diaz, but that to me shows that that's in his mind. Um, um, I think it's maybe a bit too much to expect out of himself and also for fans, but fans are fans. We we know that there are some fans in between every fan base that might scream a lot, but doesn't necessarily say the right things. Let me say it kindly that way, and we can say it another way in the chat. But that's me saying it light. I don't think baseball players listen that much to um, what fans say. So I think it's him. At least I hope they don't, um, because that's the wrong thing to go at it. Um, it's obvious to me that we wouldn't have Edwin Diaz 2022. Edwin Diaz, I think I said that in a podcast earlier. Um, Obviously, I didn't expect Edwin Diaz to have a 5.51 ERA or 5.50 ERA, whatever it is, um, in almost beginning of June. The ERA before this meltdown was more what I expected. That high twos, low threes. That's what my expectation was. So I hope Edwin Diaz eases his expectation a little bit and just works on himself to get back to being a good closer. Not elite, good. That's good enough for me. Then after we've seen players having issues with the year after coming back from the ACL injuries. So let's hope that this will be a good year and next year will be uh, the Edwin Diaz of old, if possible.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the hope for the Mets internally. Whether people are expecting from Diaz externally, I don't know. I think there's some pressure put on Diaz to be the 2022 version of himself. But even if you get the 2021 version of Edwin Diaz, that was still a good, solid closer. If you can get that, or even 2020, I know 2020 is just kind of a throwaway season, basically. But that was really the turnaround for Diaz in his Mets tenure. So if you could get back to that 2021 version of himself, I think that'd be huge for the Mets. And I think something too that to factor in about 2022, we always talk about players in contract years really kind of turning it up a notch. So maybe that was also a factor for Diaz that year because we know he was a pending free agent. Uh, that after that season, obviously the Mets gave him the highest contract for a relief pitcher. Uh, not too shortly after the season ended, maybe a month or so. Um, not to say that Diaz is like, okay, I got paid, I'm going to take it down a notch. I don't think that's how he operates, but I think when you have that little extra juice in the system, uh, it also might contribute to on-field performance.
We have seen it so much that um, it's a pattern, so to speak. Um, we see it with a lot of players that gets the money, and that's not us saying that Diaz, like you said, that I want to make that 100% clear. This guy cares so much about being an elite reliever. I doubt if we saw Edwin Diaz in 2023 that it would be that big of a drop off after getting paid. So I think the injury is definitely a big part of his struggles this year. I just think that 2022 see Edwin Diaz was such a um, amazing season that it's very hard to duplicate. Um, that I had that almost that Jacob deGrom slider pinpoint control down and away on that slider, and that was his money pitch. We saw with Jacob deGrom how much success he had with that pitch, and that's not me saying that Diaz's overall control was just as Jacob deGrom's, but that slider down and away was a pitch that he was able um, to throw there a lot. And this year, it's just been a little bit more on spots where you don't want to throw. So if he finds that probably release point, like we mentioned, we aren't Jeremy Hefner or any pitching guru guys. We just like watching, but maybe it's finding that release point and that consistency in that release point. Then hopefully he will be back. And he now has a time to work on that in some non-pressure spots.
Before we jump to Sunday's game, we'll just talk about one more pitcher from Saturday. That was Luis Severino who got the start. His May has been very weird. Obviously, he ended April on that high note, pitching the almost he almost had that no hitter against the Cubs, the 8 innings of one hit ball. But since May has come around, he had the rough start in Tampa Bay. The start against the Braves was better. Um, and then this one against the Marlins, he was able to go 6 and 2/3, but 6 hits, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. So the strikeout numbers were kind of low, usually for a guy like Severino. Overall numbers in the month of May, he's made 3 starts. He's pitched 16 and 2/3 innings. He has a 5.94 ERA, 14 hits, 11 runs, all of which are earned, 2 home runs. He's got 12 walks and 13 strikeouts. So his whip this month so far is 1.56. What do you any concerns with Luis Severino? Do you think this is just kind of like a bump in the road, perhaps? Maybe just trying to work on some things, or is this any cause for concern for Mets fans?
Not necessarily. I think if we mention all those three starts with Tampa Bay, it was the walks. But if I remember correctly, he still limited the damage. I think that's also always big if you are a starting pitcher and you are able to work around your bad starts. So uh, this outing, I think with having a pretty big lead, it's also sometimes pitchers, wanting to go deep into the game and maybe making a little bit of a different um, choice, pitch choice. We were up seven, 9-7 or 9-2, right? 9-2 or 7-2, 7-2, 9-4,
No, I just
whatever
closed the
it was.
tab. I can go back and look.
Uh, we had two big leads, so that makes the how you attack the opponent maybe a little bit differently. Obviously, you don't want to allow runs, but um, in that, if your team scores 9 runs and you go 6 and 2/3 innings of 5 runs, you expect to win that game.
Yeah, the Mets were up 7-2 going into the seventh inning, so a 5-run lead at that point. Um,
Yeah, maybe he got a little bit tired. I don't know, but until that point, he pitched a pretty good ball game. So
yeah, and something to remember too is the base runners got on. They eventually went to Reed Garrett, and the inherited runners did score on. Obviously, it gets put on uh, Severino's ERA instead of Reed Garrett's, but those guys didn't come around while Severino was on the mound. So you were kind of hoping maybe Reed Garrett, who's been mostly a shutdown guy for you this season, who's also hit a little bit of a bump in the road this year. Um, at that point, you would hope that he could limit the damage or hold the guys on. Unfortunately, just wasn't a solid Reed Garrett outing that we've come accustomed to this year.
no, it was with 2 outs. So another
Yep.
spot. Okay, if inheritance runners score when you leave, throwing 6+ innings and have second and third, then yeah, then it's on you. But with 2 out, you expect your shutdown reliever to get the third out, and that didn't happen. So, um, and then the line, especially in a small sample size of 14 innings, you said that balloons your ERA in 14 innings.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the Mets felt like they were in desperate need of a win coming into Sunday after that uh, Saturday meltdown. And they did the same thing as they did on Saturday after they scored 9 runs. The Lindor, Alonso, Nimmo trio to start the game. Lindor is making like Brandon Nimmo would, getting hit by a pitch to start the game. So he also got hit by a pitch the day before as well. So I guess it's maybe the leadoff spot, not just particular players. But the Mets did put a 4 spot up in the first inning in that game on Sunday, and that's all they really needed with Sean Manaea on the mound. Manaea went 5 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, all of which were earned, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. One of the runs did come, or actually, both the runs came on a home run uh, for the Marlins. But Sean Manaea, this is kind of the outing we've come accustomed to with him. Uh, Probably going to give you 5 innings, probably maybe 6. Um, the damage, he limits it. He gets some traffic, but he's been able to limit it uh, lately. Um, so we talk about Severino maybe being the best pitcher for the Mets so far this year, but you could argue that Sean Manaea has been the most consistent starter for the Mets this year.
Yes, it's like you said, it's these kind of outings for Sean Manaea. Although I would say that this time the pitch count was up due to foul balls and not due to walks, which is a huge difference because earlier in the season his walk rate was way up and now he walked one. You said right?
Yeah, just the 1 walk in this outing.
Yeah.
There were a lot of
So
foul balls.
a
Those ball
lot, a
boys
lot,
were
a lot of
were like
yes, a lot of foul balls on both sides.
yeah.
Also against Sixto Sanchez, there were a lot of foul balls. So. So that's to me that is a difference in Sean and I's outing that he tried to go after the hitters, but the hitters just were able to foul some pitches off. With the Marlins, although they didn't have a great lineup on paper, They were, yeah, how you say that? Sneaky.
Pesky.
Yeah, pesky. That's the word I was looking for. Pesky lineup, and it showed with Sean Mania, who still had a tremendous outing. And what a play by him! And I loved the reaction by Sean Mania after he did that little glove thing and he impressed himself a little bit. And I thought it was a great thing.
Yeah, so obviously in this game, it's funny because the Mets kind of bookend their runs. They got four in the first, and then three in the ninth. Those were the seven runs that they were able to score in this game. Brandon Nimmo hit a home run for the Mets, his seventh of the year. And the bullpen, we were wondering who how the Mets closer situation was going to go. They decided to go with Reed Garrett for the two out save in this game, and he shut the door with two
Two innings
innings.
save.
What was that?
Not, it is a two inning save, not two out save. And you said,
Or yeah, that's what I meant. Two innings. I meant two innings.
oh, it's early for you. I know we are doing this thing a little bit early, but come on, man.
Yeah, dropping the ball as usual. So two innings for Reed Garrett, one hit, struck out four. So obviously, Reed Garrett probably not going to be available for to start the series in Cleveland. Uh, but this is kind of, I think, how we're going to see the bullpen be used. In the, we talked about, or they talked about the closer role being fluid. So this is just an example of that. We know Ottavino can close some games. Jorge Lopez has closed a game this year. He has closer experience. So despite Diaz not being available or not being used in the closer role, the Mets have guys who have experience closing games in the major leagues.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can add Reed Garrett to that list, who obviously doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience being a closer, but if he's available, he's my closer. He's just that nasty right now, even after his two. I mean, people talk about a bad stretch, but it was like 2 games where he wasn't necessarily on his A game. But that guy has been money all year. His splitter was down below the zone again in his outing against the Marlins, and he was again absolutely nasty. So if available, he would be my number one choice. Also, depending on who's up, obviously. If the middle of the order is up earlier, you could say use Garrett there and maybe Lopez in the ninth, as we have seen in earlier games. But Ottavino and Garrett are my top choices for the closer spots right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would probably agree with you on that. Just before we get to the Corne minor league minute here, I just want to talk about how the Mets' usage of the outfield in your eyes. Obviously, with JD Martinez coming, it was how are they going to find at bats for guys like DJ Stewart, Tyrone Taylor, Harrison Bader, Marte, Nimmo, all those guys. There's a lot of bodies, but not very many spots in the lineup to put those guys. So just a couple weeks into this, almost a month in, to having all these guys on the roster. Have you been happy with the way they kind of rotated guys, or have tried to find spots for guys to get in, or do you think maybe a certain guy needs to get more at bats than you have seen? Just what's your how how do you think the Mets have done with trying to find at bats for all these guys who are very capable Major League Baseball players?
I'm gonna return. I'm gonna do a Uno return because obviously you have an opinion uh, giving me this question. So
No, 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 no.
go
There's no
ahead.
malice behind this. I was just curious. It was something that just popped into my mind because they gave Marte the day off on Sunday, so they got Stewart in there. I know some guys been battling the flu, so JD Martinez was one of those guys, so they gave him the most of the day off. They had Nimmo DH, and they could put Taylor in left. So, I mean, obviously they're taking advantage of this flu situation going through the clubhouse. But I'm just overall, so the couple of weeks, there's no intent behind this question. I'm genuinely curious to get your thoughts on how they've been able to get these guys into the line because we've talked about on previous podcasts making sure guys like Tyrone Taylor get in. DJ Stewart, mostly against right-handed pitching. He's done a lot of damage against. So I was just trying to. I was just asking the question. There was nothing behind it.
Oh yeah, well, I thought that this question came so out of the blue that I thought you have an opinion.
Well, I'm curious to think what you thought my opinion was, but I'll let you answer the question first.
I think it's fine. I don't necessarily have an opinion about it either way. I think we do see DJ Stewart and Tyrone Taylor in their in the rate that it's expected for their roles. So I'm good with it. I thought you probably had some guy you wanna have out of the lineup, one of the three, more often than not. Maybe a guy you talked about it last week, or another guy who hasn't been necessarily your favorite since last year. Let me put it that way.
No, Bart. I know you're talking about you're alluding to Harrison Bader and Starling Marte. Um, no, I obviously Bader's. I mean, he's hitting singles, so we have to say that. He's got the 280 batting average, but 99% of these sets have been singles. But you know what? Those singles, he's driven in some runs, so you can't complain too much about that. Obviously, Marte, while he hasn't done much with the bat of late, he's still shown he's got some value defensively. Uh, but it's just that it just sucks because really other than Alonzo Nimmo, um, Lindor to a certain extent, we saw him kind of get onto a good stretch, and we both believe it's sooner rather than later he's just gonna bust loose here. It's just not a lot of other guys. I guess we could put JD Martinez with those guys because JD's picked it up of late. But just not really from the top four down. Those about that bottom half of the door just hasn't been a lot of solid production per se. When it comes to extra base hits and stuff like that. So no, there was no. I'm not trying to advocate. For people to be out of the
All
lineup
right.
or whatnot, but you know, like we've said in past episodes, it'd be nice for some of those guys hitting, in the fifth spot or below to kind of start picking up production when it comes to more like extra base hits and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Totally agree.
Yeah, I can't believe you thought I was trying to. Would that be like me to just rail on someone?
Well, maybe not that that much as you are uh, you think, but I definitely thought that that was a question to start a discussion and to have your opinion, which is why we podcast. So it's not necessarily an illogical, an illogical thing to think. Because hey, if you want us to say something about um, a certain subject, it's up to you to start it. I
Well,
mean, you are the podcast host,
well,
so you
well,
have to find a way to get a discussion going about what you want to say too.
well. I will say, and it's something we've talked about and we both agreed on. When the off season comes around, and we've seen the Mets make this move before, so we know the money no is not an issue. They're willing to eat money on guys. If you get to the offseason and the numbers from Marte are kind of basically what they are offensively, you might and he's not a part of your future likely with all the prospects they got coming up, even though we know they haven't necessarily maybe developed the way we'd like to see it. If Marte's not part of your future and you can't find a taker, you might as well just cut him the check and say thanks a lot and open up the 40-man roster spot. But that's an off-season thing.
Yeah, that's an off-season thing, and that's also how the rest of the year plays out for not just Marte, but like you said, also the prospects. Um, I think still, even if Marte doesn't start, he could be a useful player off the bench. So, um, but it all depends.
Yeah.
We have a name who is coming up in the minor leagues, who was promoted yesterday, who you love,
Well,
and
well,
is seen as maybe as a possible fourth, fifth outfielder guy.
this is a perfect segue because we talk about the prospects maybe developing at a slower rate than we would like, but there are some guys uh, who are getting some promotions in the minor leagues. And I think it's a perfect segue to Corne's minor league minute.
Oh, so I have to start with the promotions.
Well,
Well,
it's your segment. You can go. Well, I just know guys have been promoted. This is obviously your time to shine in the show, so you can do whatever you want with it. This is your time.
well, I will start with some of the promotions because it was a perfect segue. I just wanted to be an ass as usual.
Shocker.
Um, do we bleep ass, by the way? Because now you have to
No,
bleep
we can
twice.
no, we can leave ass in. That's fine.
Surprise now. But yeah, we had some interesting, and I mean, I love the promotions. Blade did well from Binghamton to um, AAA Syracuse after a really, really good uh, season in Binghamton. He had only one outing where he allowed more than 2 runs. That was also a pretty bad outing, allowing 5 runs in 2 innings. So that raised his ERA a little bit. Um, Same for Nolan McLean, who actually also had one outing where he allowed more than 2 runs, which was his second outing of the year. He is now promoted to Binghamton from Birdland, probably taking Tidwell's spot in the Binghamton rotation, the two-way star. We talked about him a lot, so it's interesting to see how he will play in a higher level. And your guy, Rylan Thomas, who's been promoted, the guy who I mentioned, obviously, as maybe a future fourth or fifth outfielder, interesting guy, great defensively, having a great year in Binghamton. Um, so those three are the most notable promotions we had.
Yeah, and like you said, Noel McLean is going to be the most intriguing one to watch, in my opinion, just because we know the two-way player, the two-way ability, and it's been very productive in High A Brooklyn. But they always say the jump from High A to Double A is where it kind of comes a little bit of a a shock to the system. There's guy like the competition picks up, so it'll be interesting to see on both sides. Is he going to continue to pitch at a high level, or is he going to be able to hit at a high level uh, in the Double A Eastern League? So that's probably the most intriguing one to me uh, from to monitor.
Definitely. Article about Tidwell and McLean coming up and will be shared on the Queen's Connection Facebook page.
There you go.
So shall I move on with the Mets minor league
Ah,
weekend series thingies?
yes, yes. Take it away.
All right, Florida Complex League, Jeremy Rodriguez. What can we say about the FAM return, the FAM trade return? 4 for 4 day on Friday. OPS after this weekend up to 1025. Guy is still just 17 years old. Was great in the Dominican Summer League after the Mets got him, and is just keeping it up in a higher level in the Florida Complex League. So looking forward to watching him play on MILB TV because obviously the Florida Complex League we can't watch. Willie Fennis is playing well, 885 OPS so far in the Florida Complex League. And Joel Diaz had another 3 scoreless frames, allowed just 2 hits, and walked none, struck out 3 in his stint with the Florida Complex League. I hope he will be back at St. Lucie soon, getting his starts there. St. Lucie Mets, Ronald Hernandez, another guy we got in a trade last year. He was part of the David Robertson trade. He hit the first home run of the season, a grand slam on Friday, and he wasn't done in this weekend because he went 9 for 13 with 8 RBIs in the series. So pretty darn good series, if you ask me. Colin Houck, who is really, really, really struggling in St. Lucie, kind of concerning in my opinion. Did have a good day on Friday, 2 for 5 day, but his overall numbers and after the Friday day, he still didn't continue it with a couple of good games after it. So to me, it becomes a little bit concerning for a former first round pick, if I remember correct, to have such difficult time early in his minor league career. Moving on to Brooklyn, Christopher Sorrero, who was just promoted from St. Lucie to Brooklyn a couple of weeks ago, hit his first Brooklyn home run on Friday. So cool to see that from him. Douglas Orellana did it again, five innings of one-run ball. Just allowed a solo shot that only run score, struck out six. ERA went all the way up to 1.23, so 5 innings of one-run ball gets your ERA up, shows how good your season has been for Douglas Orellana. I got another look at Felipe de la Cruz. It was a Felipe de la Cruz type outing. Five solid innings, allowing just one run, but tons of base runners with 4 hits and 4 walks. He also struck out four. I always like to watch this guy pitch. He has a great fastball curve combo, which, if you watch his games, it makes hitters uncomfortable. But the walks are still a little bit of an issue for De La Cruz. I watched that Saturday game where De La Cruz pitched, and one thing that was noticeable that the Cyclones had 7 steals. Nick Morbido had 3, Omar de los Santos had 3, and Stanley Constragra had 3. And talking about Stanley Constragra, also having a difficult start to the year, but he had a home run on Saturday, his second of the year. William Lugo also homered. It was his first of the year, guy who has shown some power in earlier seasons. So it's a little bit surprising that it was his first. They both followed with another good day on Sunday. So hopefully those two guys are out of their slump. Moving on to Binghamton, if you want to say something.
No, no,
No?
no, you're good. You're good. I'm getting the Cleveland stuff already prepped, so you're good.
All right, so I'm just doing Binghamton and Syracuse, and then we are done with it. Binghamton, I think you liked it. You have mentioned you liking this guy, Luis Moreno. He had a much needed solid outing with 4 1/3 innings of one-run ball. Um, Alex Ramirez has struggled after his hot start, but rebounded somewhat with a true two-hit day on Saturday. Tyler Stewart solid again, 7 innings, allowing 3 runs. Did allow some hard hit contact, but also struck out 9. And your boy Wilking Ramos extended the scoring sitting streak to 1 1/3 score with 1 1/3 scoreless innings. He now has 14 scoreless innings to open the season. He did allow 2 hits and 2 walks, so got some base runners, but got the streak held up. And Jalen Palmer went 2 for 4 with his second home run of the season on Sunday. OPS for Binghamton so far in 8 games for Jalen Palmer is 1065. And moving to the last team, the Syracuse Mets, Trace Thompson. Uh, he had a series of the H's. He had his signature 3 home run day. Seems like he has a 3 home run day somewhere at some point in every season. So that was Friday. And he added 2 more in the series. OPS up to 901 after a very difficult start to the season. So he's been hitting very well. Luke Ritter, who after a good year last year is hitting the ball well again. I mentioned him in my notes as maybe a guy who is on the outside looking in maybe for a versatile player spot on the Magic bench at some point this year. And Hayden Sanger, last year's organizational defender of the year, or 2 years ago, I'm not sure I wrote it down correctly, had 2 hits, 3 hits, 2 doubles, 1 triple, and 3 RBIs on Friday. He's now hitting 273 with a 745 OPS. Well, that's not mind blowing. He also had a difficult start to the year, and he's a tremendous defender. So, tremendous defender out of the catcher spot is also always interesting. And Peterson had another strong outing on Sunday. David Peterson, 5 2/3 innings of one-run ball, and another outing where he kept his walks down. That
The,
was the
the
sound
the
of.
celebratory rip of the paper for the segment being
I'm
done.
done. I'm done.
There, you can take a break, catch your breath. You talk about David Peterson. making a rehab start. Seems like he's going to be coming back pretty soon. Well, someone is coming back from their rehab assignment to start Monday for the Mets in Cleveland as they begin a 3-game series with the first place Guardians. That person would be Tyler McGill. So obviously the Mets will have to make a roster move before the game to get McGill active on the roster. He's going up against Ben Lively. That's a 6:10 first pitch Eastern Standard Time. That's also the same case for Tuesday night, 6:10 start. Very, no, we see a lot of 6:40s, but not a lot of 6:10s. So that's very
So
interesting start time by Cleveland. Uh, Very intriguing pitching matchup here on Tuesday night. It's Adrian Hauser making his return to the rotation, going against Carlos Carrasco, who was
yeah,
obviously
we as
former.
we as pitching guys will probably love that game.
Yes, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of strikeouts, a 2-1 game. Each team's going to be scratching out to just get 5 hits.
And now we say this, that's exactly what's gonna happen.
Yes, that's probably exactly what's going to happen. And
Honestly, I would be all for that. One thing, yes, Carlos Carrasco wasn't good last year, but it seems like he's a tremendous dude. So, not having a great season so far in Cleveland as well. Uh, and I hope that Adrian Hauser gets it going too, obviously, for our own case. So,
yeah,
a win, a nice low scoring win would be the perfect scenario for me.
yes, if Hauser gives us an outing similar to his first one of the year against Detroit, you can't complain too much about that. We'll wrap things up with a Wednesday matinee, 1:10 first pitch. It's going to be Jose Quintana going up against Tristan McKenzie. Tristan McKenzie, a New York boy, if I remember correctly. Um, well, I'm going to click on this page just to double check and make sure I don't sound like an idiot. Yeah, Brooklyn, New York. So he's a New York boy. So definitely always interested to see, just kind of like Josiah Gray's a New York guy, New Rochelle. There's some New York
Yeah,
guys pitching in the big leagues.
you're probably a little more into that than I am. I don't necessarily have that affection with New York.
Well, you see,
Uh,
you have stuff going on in your life, outside activities, while I don't. So I just kind of, this stuff kind of. I guess what I'm saying is you're more occupied with your life than I am. You got more stuff going on than I do, so I can take the time to look up this crap and just have it in my back pocket and pull it out for situations like this. Put it that way.
all
Try to
right,
make
gotcha.
try to make it sound like I'm not as much of a loser as I am. So,
Oh my God.
but
uh,
with
I'm,
that
I'm
being said,
I'm smartly not gonna comment on that because it's yeah, maybe it works that I can't comment negative things about you when you do it yourself or something like that. Maybe that's your new strategy.
well, with all that being said, you've been struggling of late with your series
Oh,
predictions.
yes,
So, 3 against the Cleveland Guardians. What do you think?
2 out of 3 for the Mets.
Feeling confident in that?
Yeah, fairly confident. Obviously, just like Edwin Diaz, I'm not on my A game over the last week, so my confidence in predicting correctly is a little bit shot. Um, but I, if I, yeah, I think 2 out of 3. Um, I think it's a tough ballpark, but I think maybe getting a little bit out of the East Coast environment. I have no reason or belief or anything. Uh, maybe I remember this wrong, but I have a feeling that we always play Cleveland pretty decently. But maybe that's um, wrong memory of mine. But I don't have necessarily a feeling that they are um, met killing team or something like that.
Well, if memory serves me correctly, here's another example of me just being a total loser. Last year in New York, I believe the Mets took 2 of 3, or maybe it was a doubleheader. I know they won the Friday game. They had that amazing comeback. And then I think they had a doubleheader on Sunday. And I think Sunday Night Baseball was a Verlander start. I think the Mets might have swept them last year. And then
Well,
obviously 2019, they swept them in New York. I remember that vividly. So we were there for two of them.
Really?
And then
Oh, okay.
2016 was, I believe, the last time they were in Cleveland. I think they took two of three. So,
Well,
so
then
there
I
you go.
wasn't wrong.
So there you go. No,
Yeah.
yeah. So the Mets seem to have Cleveland's number. And that being said, Mets are just going to get swept now. It's just how it goes.
I love your positivity, Andrew.
Well, just
Goes. Let us start a different segue because I'm now always predicting because you stopped because you so you can pick your player of the series and it can be a pitcher who is making a great start, but
so.
your player of the
So you
series,
so you want me to predict the player that's going to have the best series?
yes, or yeah, I mean I will give it to you if one of the starters gives us a tremendous outing and another starter gives also a tremendous outing, then I will give it to you.
Okay. Uh, let's see here. Let's go with Jeff McNeil to have a nice series in Cleveland. There's your
All right,
positivity for you. Saying
that's
I'm always negative and whatnot. Let's say Jeff McHitz comes back. He has a good series against Cleveland. How about he gets a clutch RBI late in the game? We'll go that
yeah.
far.
I like this segment. We should do this every time.
There we go. You can predict the
And
series. I'll predict the player of the series. And then
exactly, and then we can do a patent of approval.
the stamp of approval, the plop.
Yeah, but you patented
Oh, you patented it.
it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I see what you're getting at. Yeah. Okay, that's good. I like that. That's good. That's good. Yeah. And now watch Jeff McNeil go over 12 in the series.
Well, there was that was all for the positivity from you.
Well, I'm just saying I got a knack for you know I think this guy's gonna do something really good, or I think this team's gonna win, or whatever, but then nothing. So
Well, you were right about some people as well, Andrew. Don't be too harsh on yourself.
that's right. I got an eye for for some guys. Just maybe not
Exactly.
maybe not necessarily the great eye I think I have overall. So
I think everybody is wrong in baseball because baseball is definitely hard to predict.
that's true. That's very, very
So,
true. Who thought the Mets were going to be four under 500 at this point? Not me.
well,
Not me going into the season after they signed Jim. I mean, we had that whole discussion last episode. If you want to go check that out, go look at the YouTube page or the Facebook. It's a long clip. You said it's a long clip. I was like that was half the conversation we had. So you
it
know,
was 8 minutes or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah, it was.
it's not really much of a clip as much of a posting a full segment, but that wasn't even half the segment. So oh well. All right. I think we're going to wrap this one up. So thanks for joining us as always, sir. I know we went a little early, so you can get your beauty sleep since you're 6 hours ahead of us. I don't think some people realize that all the time, but you need your beauty sleep.
Yeah, and I have night shifts. So
That's right.
because if I'm 6 hours ahead of you, then and we talk, and I just said that you were up very early, then they think that I just sleep all day, but I work nights.
Well, you kind of sleep all day. So,
Yeah, it's because I work nights. Yeah, it's
exactly.
both too.
See, sleep. Come on, get it. All right. All right, everyone. We're going to wrap up this episode here. This has been the Queen's Connection podcast, a production of Pat and Sports Creative. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you Thursday or Friday. We'll figure it out. Stay on the lookout, but enjoy this 3-game series against the Cleveland Guardians.